Hello everybody. Today I have Dr. George with me in here, Philippines. He is a PhD doctor in chemical engineering and has many degrees in environment. So, Dr. George, please tell me when you have a disaster like flood. So, what are the challenges you face here?
Uh, well, first of all, thank you, Sabir, for talking to us. And I think, like Pakistan, Philippines faces so many disasters of flooding, and it's all the result of climate change. People have to understand the connection between climate change and the flooding. And when the flooding happens, uh, first we have a problem of trying to convince people to have to evacuate the houses because many times they don't believe that there's a big flood coming. And in some areas of the country, especially where I'm working, the flood can happen in maybe 20 minutes. It will go from you don't see any, the water in the river to all of a sudden it's over the houses of people. It could be very dangerous. So we have to try to get people evacuated. Very difficult. And then what happens during the flood? Many people die, their homes are taken, their animals are killed, very, very difficult. And then afterwards, it's also a big challenge because you're spread the sewage, the garbage, all of this causes the spread of bacteria and so on. So we have to think of all that. But the best thing we can do is to make ourselves aware of what are the causes of climate change. Everybody has to do what we can to try to limit the impact of climate change, and we have to do what we can to prepare people for all the devastating effects of climate change. Not only flooding, but extreme heat we also suffer.
In Pakistan, food are wasted in a high amount. So, food waste has an impact on climate change. So, can you briefly explain that how waste can be a danger for our environment?
Yes. Well, there are many problems, because one is if you just discard waste, after the waste decomposes, it's beginning to decompose, then it becomes a avenue for bacteria, fungi, and other, we call it pathogens. Pathogens are microorganisms that can cause disease, so they can spread. But that's one. The other thing is if food waste, for example, is not properly managed, taken care of, then what happens is it could clog our rivers and canals. It makes flooding even worse after some time. But the other big concern is that if you just throw food waste, and especially if you allow it to decompose anaerobically, it produces methane, and methane is a very potent gas that causes it's a greenhouse gas that causes also climate change. So here in my country, we're trying to convince people to compost the food waste. One is you have to minimize the food waste as much as possible, and then the second is the remaining food we also feed it to animals so it gets used, and then the ones that cannot be fed to animals, we compost it because the compost will create a rich fertilizer which you can add to the soil. You basically allow nature to enrich the soil again, and when you compost it, you don't create the high levels of methane and greenhouse gases. So it's a way to also fight climate change.
So, Dr. Jar, my next question is about plastic. A ban was imposed on plastic in Pakistan in 1994, but that was opposed by the manufacturer of plastic. That thousands of people are associated with plastic industry and they were jobless. And
Yes.
next they said that if we go for paper bags, so it involves cutting off many trees, which is not advisable. So implementing a policy is a big issue. So what do you think on based on your experience, how to implement these laws in our country?
Ah, well, I can only speak about my experience working in the Philippines and in other countries, especially when I was doing work for the United Nations. And I've never been to Pakistan. I hope one of these days I can visit your country. I would be so excited to see. But this is a big problem in the whole world because even where I live now, there was actually a plastic waste regulation that was passed in 2011, and it was only enforced for 3 months because the plastic industry fought it. And you can imagine now the whole world is buried in so much plastic. One thing people have to remember is plastic will remain with us for hundreds of years. So I tell people, for example, people buy now these diapers made of plastic. Many years ago, we made it out of cloth and people would just wash it and use it again. Then the big companies came and they said, oh, you should buy these plastic diapers. So think about this. If you have a baby and you use plastic diapers, when you throw that diaper away, that diaper is going to be on earth long after your baby has died, his or her babies have died, long after your great-great-great-grandchildren have already died. That plastic is still there because the plastics stay for a long time. And now we know that plastic breaks into small particles that get into our fish, into our water, into milk and many other things. You know? So what do we have to do? We have to convince people that we have to move away from plastic, and we have to challenge the plastics industry, because in my country, for example, we're calling for a return to the traditional bags and baskets that we used to make, made out of natural fibers that would last maybe a whole year. We use it when we would buy groceries and so on. Instead of throwing plastic, this thing will last for a while, and then if it's already old and broken, you just bury it into the ground. It will be like compost. Yeah. You know, it's natural fiber. And what I argue is that if we build up all these many types of jobs that has to be on zero waste, on reducing waste, on natural products and so on, there'll be more jobs than the jobs that are coming just from the plastics industry, of which only a small percentage of people actually benefit. We want everyone, more and more people, to benefit through green jobs. These are jobs that are sustainable and protect our health and the environment at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Jha, for your time. Thank you
very much. Thank you.